Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle and I have the privilege of serving as president of Stadia Church Planting. I am so excited to have you with us here this morning at Exponential Backstage Live. Most excited to have our special guest, Mr. Pat Gelsinger, with us. I've been friends with Pat for quite a number of years now and partners with him in Kingdom Expansion. Pat, welcome to the show. It's an absolute delight to have you with us. Pat, you started with VMware about 2012. It's more than, I think, doubled in size since you've been there, or nearly doubled in size. Prior to that, for 30 years, you were the company's first CTO in the really in the industry and developed USB and Wi-Fi. You're the author of The Juggling Act, which is bringing balance and faith to life and work, which I've read twice and everybody needs to pick up. Pat, so good to have you with us. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks, Greg. And, it's been great to get to know you, to interact with the Exponential folks, to, help to start Stadia, right? That wonderfully employs you. And, as we're out to plant lots and lots of churches, my career in technology has been, as I like to describe it, the Cinderella career from, a farm boy in Pennsylvania to now running a software company, VMware. We're about 60 billion in market cap, about 9 billion in revenue this year. As I like to describe it, I got 23,000 souls that work for me here that I'm responsible for, and their families and communities. And, it's been an incredible journey.
I've heard you refer to yourself as the pastor of one of the world's largest churches, actually. And it's not just business for you, it really is ministry.
Yeah. And, soon after I became a Christian in 1980, I felt called by God to go into full-time ministry. And I arm wrestled with God and, basically says, what are you talking about, God? I love this technology stuff. I'm good at it. I laid a fleece before God like Gideon did. And the answer to that was the workplace is your ministry. And, one of the things, I often do when I'm speaking in different settings, with mostly Christians, I'll ask, how many of you are full-time ministers? And, a few will raise their hands and, and then I'll, Colossians 3:23 and 24, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men. We're all called to be workplace, marketplace, home place, school place, ministers. And then usually by the end of the interaction, everybody's sort of getting it. We're all called to a full-time ministry. Mine happens to be in the workplace. And I have 23,000 souls that are part of my church that I'm responsible for.
No, Pat, one of the things I love about you is you have all of these things going on in life, but you also have a spirit of adventure about you and risk-taking, that transfers marketplace and personal life. You just recently summited, literally just a couple weeks ago, Mount Kilimanjaro. Why'd you do that?
Well, Kili was always a bucket list item. I like, I have a fairly long and aggressive bucket list of items. And as the years click on, I like to keep clicking them off. But it was also a fundraiser for Missions of Hope International. And they do work in the slums of Nairobi. Linda and I have been supporting it for almost 20 years. They're now over 16,000 kids are in the schools that are run there, and this was to build a new girls' high school, boarding school. Particularly girls are deeply susceptible to tribal patterns of, being sold off as the fourth wife of a tribal leader for 4 cows at 11 years old. And so keeping them in school is really essential to breaking many of those tribal patterns that continue to commit people to poverty. And we raised over $300,000 on the trip, and there's going to be a new boarding school breaking ground shortly as a result. But, I appreciate you there as well, Greg, because I think you just did a little climb also.
Yeah, my wife and I actually just did the Salcantay Trail to Machu Picchu, 52 miles over 15,000 foot of altitude, and didn't quite hit the numbers you did. I think we're approaching 160,000, all of that to plant churches in Southeast Asia. So I appreciate the kindred spirits, Pat. Hey, Pat, I want to jump right into the hero maker topic. Got a lot of church planters online with us today, and marketplace ministers like yourself, and honestly, men and women that are kind of thinking and wanting to learn, how can I be effective as a full-time minister in my marketplace job? In the hero making, it really starts out with multiplication thinking. The idea that you as a leader certainly have a lot of leverage with your own life, but really thinking long-term, how can I leverage my own life out through others? Can you speak into that and how you've applied that in the marketplace and really in your kingdom-minded ministry?
Yeah, and I'll say it was sort of it's a little story. I remember when I got my first patent, right? Oh, man, I'm an inventor, right? That's like super cool. And then it's sort of like I got my second patent. It's okay. I'm still an inventor, right? And all of a sudden I realized that it's a much bigger thing to turn the entire organization into inventors. And how do you replicate that? And so I took on the task at the time of driving Intel's total patent program, which was like 50 patents. And Intel, as you know, probably is about 3,000 patents per year now, right? But you needed to activate the whole of the entity to do that. And, to me, that's turning people into inventors at the time, who then turned other people, who then, recruited people and turning them, and that idea of replication and, onto the second and third generation, is core to any multiplicative and at the heart of what Exponential does. And, I've taken on a deep view that, the most productive thing I can do is turn somebody else into a multiplier who also has that genetic of passing on multiplication.
Yeah. So, Pat, let's talk about this idea of for our church planters who are engaged with us right now. They have marketplace people, obviously, in their new churches, in their longtime churches, whatever. How can they best engage someone like Pat Gelsinger or the marketplace person to become, a reproducer like you and your wife Linda have become?
Yeah, and a lot of, I'll say, and I've seen this over and over again, that, churches don't know how to use marketplace leaders, right? Maybe there's a bit of intimidation there. Ooh, he's a business guy. He has a big budget. His organization's bigger than my organization. There may be, this view of, you need to be humble, right? So here you take a marketplace leader who might run an organization of thousands of people, and would you mind cleaning the toilets and helping change baby diapers? Right? Hey, those are not bad things of service, but you're not leveraging the gifts of marketplace leaders. So I'll say with that, you have to engage them as true leaders, right? You have a leadership role in the church. They have a leadership role in business. How do you equip them, minister to them? They're challenged in many, many ways, and being willing to be confident in your own skin as a church leader, to engage people in the marketplace because they desperately need those kind of tools and capabilities. But then working with them, how can you unleash them? And, obviously the TBC thing that we'll talk about in a minute is, hey, my minister is most interested in serving me in the capacity of how does he activate what I'm doing in the marketplace? How can you come into the business place? Maybe that's more of a chaplain kind of role. Where else can you be bringing value to the business leaders and turning those business leaders into people who are out connecting? Because they're going to be able to do a lot of things that you can't do. They're neutral, they're influential. They might be able to reach business leaders, civic leaders, others in the community that you as a church leader don't have any authority, right? Or impact. And in this post-Christian society, maybe even starting at a deficit.
Pat, that certainly played out in our personal relationship and your relationship with Stadia. You're one of my key resources to go to seek wisdom and insight, to ask the questions about leveraging globally and the use of technology and Linda's spiritual gift of discernment, right?
Yeah, amen.
Yes. And so this idea of engaging you, because you are intimidating. I mean, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just remember the first time I came to sit down with you. I mean, it was intimidating to sit down with you. And until there was a point where I valued our relationship so much that it became a friendship where I viewed my relationship with how can I best serve Pat as his friend to help him become a more fulfilled disciple of Jesus. And that's a key aspect. I think there's a big shift there from what can I get from this marketplace person to how can I better help disciple this marketplace person.
Yeah, amen. And I think that's well stated, Greg. And, I have, the church where we go, Gary, he's in my office tomorrow morning, and he's always going to say, how can I pray for you, Pat? How's your ministry going? How can I partner with you, right, in what you are doing? And, if you're intimidated by these marketplace leaders, you got to work hard to get over that. Right. And again, it's not easy. Again, many of these will be business leaders and others. And, generally we're pretty busy, so we're hard to get on our calendar. We're pretty focused. So, ain't much time for coffee and donuts. So, all those types of things, you got to make it a good use of their time. Right.
Yeah.
Time's at a premium.
So this hero maker idea, this idea of permission giving as for multiplication, often, permission giving can result in wonderful results, but there are other times where it results in failure. Can you speak to that a little bit as you've looked at permission giving over the years?
Yeah. And, the first thing is, if you're not taking risk, right, you're not going to do anything that really requires faith or, steps out beyond. And so failure and risk-taking are hand in hand, and if there aren't failures, you're not taking risks, right? It's just that simple. And if you're not taking risk, right, you don't have a walk of faith, right? There's no way that you come on a logical conclusion otherwise. So, the first is you have to be willing to and, accept that failure will happen on that journey. And you're ready to, shove your ego back where it belongs and pick up, learn from those situations and move forward. Permission given is also this, extraordinary, right, aspect of permission giving is that, I'm imbuing some of my credibility, some of my success on you, right? And I'm saying, hey, Greg Nettles and Stadia, you get to use my name, my credibility, my authority, right, as part of that journey with you. And I'm on the journey with you. I may not be there, right, in person or work, but hey, I'm going with you, right, on this. And, I'm as committed to your success as part of this. So to me, permission is almost like a passive thing. To me, it's even more proactive than that. I'm giving you authorization to be me in these settings and commit more than just, finances or others to it.
Pat, in this idea of disciple making, rather than just gathering followers, but rather, multiplying out to leverage, there has to be intentionality in that. And so, for instance, I have a group of leaders that are coming out with me to Palo Alto next spring that you've agreed to spend a day with. They're actually business marketplace leaders, young and up and coming leaders. What are some of the other things that you intentionally do to kind of make disciples who make disciples, if you will?
Yeah, well, I huge, early in my career, some of the folks on the line might know the name Andy Grove. And Andy was a seminal figure in Silicon Valley. One of the most influential figures for all of technology for many years. He was my mentor.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of plucked me out and, invested in my life. And as I like to describe it, mentoring with Andy Grove was like going to the dentist and not getting Novocaine. Right. He was tough. He was hard. He was aggressive and that. But, the thing about it was that he made me better. Right. And he was deeply committed to make me better. And knock off those rough edges, we're diamonds in the rough. So, the first idea is that we all need mentors. And, in it, we need those people who are just committed to being, fellow travelers with us, making us better. The other thing is I've tried to replicate some of what Andy poured into my life with other people. I described that if we're going to mentor together, or if we're going to, maybe that's a safer word than disciple and not, in a business setting, that if we're going to mentor together, everything is on the table. I don't do business mentoring. I don't do professional mentoring. I do life mentoring. And if we spend a lot of time on family, on your marriage, right, and that's your key derailment, to business success, then that's the best use of time. It may be business decisions. It may be, character development. But to me, it's everything is on the table. And if I'm going to mentor somebody and I have that discussion with them to start with, right? It's, clear understanding up front that everything goes. And, sort of the last thing I do is I always use Linda, right? Everybody I mentor, right? And every person that we sort of bring into that kind of relationship, I use her sixth sense to pass judgment or not. Right. And because particularly as business leaders and obviously people in church settings, you don't always get to choose who you might minister to. But I do think there's this aspect of how do you decide who you disciple, right? In that inner circle. And I think you need wisdom in that because, some people, they're not going to make good use of your time. There may be other character flaws there that you just want to know before you go into any such relationship. And to me, the discernment of Linda is a super important aspect of that.
Yeah, I've watched that in your life over the years where you've opened up your home to my wife and I. You've been in my home. You've seen the good, bad, and ugly. Because we've spent time together. And I know that Linda's a key part of that and your partnership in ministry. Pat, as we talked about this idea of gift activation, certainly you're a highly gifted leader, but is there, how are you seeing gifts in others? How are you activating gifts in others? How does that play out in the marketplace and ministry?
Yeah. Well, let me, I know we wanted to touch on, let me tell just a little bit of the TBC story now, right?
Okay.
If we would, great. And
Transforming the Bay with Christ.
Yeah. And people can go online, tbc.city, and you can see the work that we helped to start in the Bay Area. And, what happened as we moved back to the Bay Area from Boston 6 years ago, I felt God was calling, saying there's something bigger here than just a big CEO job. And, my prayer was if I can bring together 3 business leaders with 3 faith leaders and we're committed together to change the Bay, then you're in it, God. And my 3 faith leaders were Francis Chan, John Ortberg, and Chip Ingram. 3 nationally recognized faith leaders. And I had my short list of Christian business leaders, though, that I knew. So we came together and a handful of others. But the amazing thing when we came together was they didn't know each other. They all lived in the Bay Area. They didn't know each other. They had never, they respected each other. They didn't know each other. And it's like, how can you, carry out the call of Jesus in the book of John, that you might be one if you don't know each other? And it took a neutral convener, me, to bring together, right, these faith leaders. And what you often find is that in it, you just need a different perspective, a different influence to bring about, this idea of activation. And in it now, out of that for TBC, Transforming the Bay with Christ, we're committed to unify the Christian leadership of the Bay, amplify works of service to the Bay, and multiply the churches in the Bay, right? Obviously, the exponential connection there is strong. But out of that, we're releasing now giftedness across the Bay Area. Pastors are changing pulpits and, they're having joint projects. We have beautiful day activities of service where, multiple churches partner and close down. And, this is fallow ground in the Bay Area. It's the least churched area in the nation. It's the only area in the nation where no faith affiliation is over 50% of the population. Right. It's just, some of these kind of things, but, out of that hard ground, right, we're seeing bones come back to life. And, it's been quite a thrilling journey. And as a business guy, it's been uniquely rewarding for us.
And one of the key components of Transforming the Bay with Christ is, of course, church planting.
Yes.
You're a huge proponent of church planting. Why?
Well, and, obviously just telling a little bit of the Stadia story with you, I had gone and, your predecessor, Mark Bigelow, had asked me to come and speak at Northern California Evangelistic Association at the time. And he asked me, would you be willing to support us after I spoke at a weekend event? And and Mark had, good systems, how to plant, how to coach planters, also the ROI of church planting, if you would. Mature churches, they don't convert people, right? They service people, right? They become almost more social clubs. Young churches bring new people to Christ, and that's ultimately what we're called to do. And so the economics, right? If you view it in change souls, and as I describe it, the only currency that matters when we come to the gates of heaven is how many souls have you touched for eternity. And if that's your currency, church planting has extraordinary ROI, right? If I put it in business terms. So out of that first meeting with Mark, was super convinced of the systems, the process, the math and the ROI. And I responded to Mark saying, no, I have no interest in supporting Northern California Evangelistic Association, but if you become a national organization, I will help fund it to get it underway. And out of that sort of, little seedling came what's now Stadia. And how many churches are we going to do this year, Greg?
Yeah, it'll be over 150 this year, new churches, Pat, and more than 200, I believe, next year. So thank you for your vision and leveraging out. And, as you talk about leveraging your kingdom impact, I mean, that's really what your life is about and I know I keep saying this, but it really is for you and Linda in that partnership together. Talk about, maybe how you're deciding, what's the direction of our kingdom building?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the we look for the following things. As we invest and we partner, we'll only invest in things that are faith oriented. There's a lot of good philanthropic works that aren't faith oriented. We only invest and partner with faith orientation works, that truly have a core focus to disciple making. Secondly, we're only going to invest where we believe that we can make a difference, right? We're not going to be, giving $100 to something and, sort of who cares, right? And we do give $100 to something and who cares, but it's where, we meaningfully can partner to make a difference. Third, we're going to do it solely with people that we know, that we trust, that we can attest to their integrity over time. And have confidence in their sustained leadership, and we're going to do it with a real view of this ROI, right? Right? We can make a difference, but the ministry is going to make a difference, and with big long-term goals. And while we're not in our 20s anymore, we still have a lot of life left in us. You'll appreciate this, Greg. I'm not sure if I ever told you a story, but the first time I met Luis Palau, right? And he was in his 70s at the time, and we were asking about partnering with them. I says, Luis, you're going to die soon. Why should I get involved with the Palau ministry? Right? So every time he sees me, he says, I'm not dead yet, right? But it's very much, hey, I'm expecting that the things that we partner with have longevity, for decades to come. And, if the Lord tarries a few more decades, but the things we're going to be involved in need to be expanding, growing, impacting for the long term.
Pat, there's a lot of marketplace leaders online with us right now. I want you to speak directly to them about maybe the differences, encouraging, whatever's on your heart.
Well, I'd say, early, one is for a marketplace leader, God has called you to give it away. And early in our marriage, Linda and I were challenged. Wayne Bigelow, Mark Bigelow's dad, the founder of TBC, of Stadia. His father spoke, and he said, that he and his wife had made a commitment to give an increasing percentage of their gross income to the Lord's work yearly. And Linda and I took that commitment to heart, and we started to do exactly that, 10%, 11%. And, that was almost 35 years ago. So, we're now closing in on 50%. And, as marketplace leaders, you start to get, meaningful incomes. Giving it away allows you to have extraordinary influence. Secondly, when you give it away, you're not just giving finances, but you got to put your character behind it as well. you're willing to put your name next to it. You're willing to show up with time, your network as well. One of the things in the Kilimanjaro hike, I took, 3 other VMware folk along with me. Right. And, that just sort of created this, right. Excitement, right. It's like all of VMware, right. 4 of us went, but it felt like 23,000 went up the mountain, together. But, you're giving of your resources financially, but also of your character, right. Of your name, of your brand, of who you are, in addition to your time, your network, and your influence. And, otherwise, God will just say, hey, why did I give you any wealth at all? Why did I give you any capacity at all? Right. And ultimately, Colossians 3:23 and 24, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that you receive the reward of the inheritance. It's the Lord Christ whom you serve. And for that, right, it's great that I get a salary from VMware, right? And I get a good salary. But ultimately, my CEO is named Jesus Christ.
Wow. Okay, let's flip the coin now. You know how hard it is to plant churches, and we have a lot of church planters, couples, individuals online with us right now. As a business leader, as someone who is a person of influence, CRN's Executive of the Year, in fact, I think just recently named. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Speak into the hearts. You've done this into my heart numerous times, but speak into the hearts of church planters right now.
Clearly church, it is hard, but you're like a startup, right? And I'll put it in venture capital terms, and I'll say, I'm a venture capitalist, right? I'm ready to invest in your startup. You need coaching, you need capital, you need a vision, right? What's your product? Right? Or, why is it, or, why is that different than the one that's down the street on the left or across town on the right? What's your product? Why is it different? And for it, make sure you got good people around you, right? You're not planting a church, you're leading a team that is planting a church. And clearly, if you and your spouse don't got it together, you have no business being a church planter. She got to be, about 110% into it. If you're 101, she needs to be 110 because she'll, carry more of that brunt and burden. So got to be a team to do it. And, as part of that team, you need some business leaders, not just a great worship leader. You need some coaches and mentors around you. And not that you always do what they say, but you always deeply hear what they say, right? And you're ready to have some of those rough edges knocked off of you. You're ready to have some failures in the process. Every good startup company probably goes through 3 major replans till they actually hit it big. Wow. And, if you think about that in the church context, right, you're going to do some ducking and weaving until you get it right. And, ultimately it's not a business, right? It's a spiritual temple that you're building there. So, you need to practice, being a good camel knee person and, get down on them and use them regularly.
So Pat, we have several, quite a few actually, Exponential regional conferences coming up this fall. I'm excited to be at the Washington, D.C. area one speaking this fall. You're going to be speaking as well. Talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, we're having one in the Bay Area in October, so I'm one of the speakers there. And we, TBC, partnered with Exponential last year to have the first Bay Area Exponential conference ever. So, we're sort of learning how to do this, but we're trying to take this very fallow land of the Bay Area and start to plow it up a little bit to make it a little bit softer. So enthusiastic. And for any on the West Coast, hope to see you in October 22 and 23 in the Bay Area for Exponential.
Pat, thank you deeply for sharing your time and wisdom with us today. Perhaps more importantly, for sharing who God's created you to be to become a hero maker, leveraging out your life in God's kingdom.
It's been great. Thank you, Greg, and congratulations making it up Machu Picchu. And thank you for the coaching of me getting up to Kilimanjaro, but ultimately for your leadership of Stadia, the partnership with Exponential, that we could plant churches that touch every human of our day for the kingdom, and every child having a church. So love you, brother.
Love you too, Pat. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you at this fall's regionals.